Billionaire mocked her as a waitress, but later he regretted it when he learned who she really was. The rain fell in steady sheets outside the upscale restaurant, its rhythmic patter against the windows blending seamlessly with the soft hum of conversation and clinking glassware inside. The room was alive with a kind of energy that only money could buy. Crisp linen tablecloths, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over polished silverware, and waitstaff moving with practiced precision between tables. At one corner booth sat Adrian Cole, a man whose name carried weight far beyond the confines of this establishment. Dressed in a tailored navy suit that screamed power, his Rolex glinting under the ambient lighting, he exuded an air of confidence bordering on arrogance. To anyone watching, Adrian was the epitome of success, a self-made billionaire who had clawed his way to the top through sheer determination and ruthless ambition. Adrian's eyes scanned the room lazily, taking in the scene around him with mild disinterest. He wasn't here for the food or even the company. Tonight was about sealing yet another deal, adding another trophy to his already overflowing cabinet of achievements. Across from him sat two men in equally expensive suits, their laughter forced but convincing enough to pass muster. They were investors, eager to get a slice of Adrian's latest venture, a tech startup poised to revolutionize artificial intelligence. As they spoke animatedly about market projections and profit margins, Adrian nodded along, his mind half focused on the conversation and half distracted by the server approaching their table. She moved gracefully despite the chaos of the bustling dining floor, balancing a tray laden with drinks like it weighed nothing at all. Her dark hair was pulled back into a neat bun, stray wisps framing her face as she navigated the narrow space between chairs. She wore the standard black uniform of the restaurant staff, though something about her demeanor set her apart from the others. There was a quiet elegance to her movements, a subtle authority in the way she carried herself that seemed incongruous with her role. When she reached their table, Adrian barely glanced up, waving her off impatiently when she asked if they needed anything else. "Water," he barked without looking at her, his tone dismissive. "And make sure it's cold." She didn't flinch, nor did she offer any reaction beyond a polite nod. "Of course, sir. I'll be right back." Her voice was calm, measured, and carried just a hint of warmth that Adrian either didn't notice or chose to ignore. As she turned to leave, one of the investors leaned forward conspiratorially, his lips curling into a smirk. "You know," he said, his voice low but loud enough for everyone at the table to hear, "I've always found it amusing how people think waiting tables is some kind of noble profession. Honestly, if you can't do better than this after college, maybe you should reconsider your life choices." He chuckled at his own joke, clearly expecting Adrian to join in. Adrian raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his seat as his gaze flicked briefly toward the retreating figure of the waitress. "Oh, come on," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Let's not kid ourselves. People don't end up here because they're ambitious, they end up here because they have no other options. If she had real talent or drive, she wouldn't be serving us water right now." His words hung in the air, sharp and cutting, though neither man seemed particularly bothered by them. The investor laughed again, shaking his head in agreement. "Exactly. You'd think someone with brains would aim higher than this. What a waste." Neither of them noticed, or cared, that the waitress had paused momentarily near the kitchen entrance, her back to them. For a fleeting second, her shoulders stiffened before she resumed walking, disappearing behind the swinging doors. Adrian returned his attention to the conversation, dismissing the brief interruption entirely. After all, why should he care? To him, she was just another faceless cog in the machine, someone whose existence barely registered beyond the momentary inconvenience of having to ask for more water. But what Adrian failed to realize, and what the waitress knew all too well, was that appearances could be deceiving. Beneath the surface of her modest uniform and unassuming demeanor lay a story far more complex than either man could have imagined. And while Adrian might have thought himself untouchable in his gleaming tower of wealth and influence, fate had a way of leveling the playing field when least expected. The waitress returned moments later, placing a chilled bottle of mineral water and 3 glasses on the table with practiced efficiency. Her hands moved deftly, pouring the water with a fluidity that suggested years of repetition. Yet there was something deliberate in her actions, a subtle grace that hinted at a deeper level of intentionality. Adrian watched her out of the corner of his eye, though his expression remained indifferent. To him, she was still just a background character, a fleeting presence in the grand narrative of his evening. But as she straightened and turned to leave, her fingers brushed lightly against the edge of the tablecloth, an almost imperceptible gesture that sent a shiver down his spine. It wasn't until she spoke that Adrian truly paid attention. "Is there anything else I can assist you with?" Her voice was soft but firm, carrying a note of professionalism that bordered on formality. It struck him then, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. There was an underlying strength in her tone, a quiet assurance that seemed at odds with her position. For a split second, Adrian felt a flicker of curiosity, though he quickly dismissed it as irrelevant. Instead, he waved her away again, muttering a curt "no," before refocusing on the conversation at hand. The rest of the meal passed in much the same manner, Adrian dominating the discussion, the investors nodding enthusiastically, and the waitress appearing intermittently to refill glasses or clear plates. Each time she approached, Adrian found himself inexplicably drawn to her movements, though he couldn't quite articulate why. Perhaps it was the way she carried herself, with a poise that suggested she belonged somewhere far removed from this dimly lit restaurant. Or perhaps it was the faint smile that lingered on her lips, one that never quite reached her eyes but hinted at secrets untold. Whatever it was, it gnawed at the edges of his awareness, planting a seed of unease that he couldn't shake. When dessert arrived, a decadent chocolate mousse accompanied by fresh berries, the waitress lingered slightly longer than necessary. She adjusted the placement of the dishes with meticulous care, ensuring each spoon was aligned perfectly with its respective plate. Adrian caught himself staring, his brow furrowing as he studied her profile. There was something familiar about her features, though he couldn't place where he might have seen her before. Her skin bore a natural glow, untouched by heavy makeup, and her eyes, dark and piercing, seemed to hold a depth that belied her current circumstances. "You seem different," Adrian blurted out suddenly, surprising even himself. The words slipped out before he could stop them, earning him quizzical looks from both investors. One of them chuckled nervously, clearly unsure whether Adrian was joking or genuinely intrigued. For the remainder of the evening, Adrian found it increasingly difficult to concentrate on the business at hand. His thoughts kept drifting back to the waitress, replaying their brief exchange in his mind. There was something about her, something intangible yet undeniable, that refused to leave him alone. It wasn't merely her composure or the enigmatic quality she exuded. It was the way she had addressed him, as though she possessed knowledge he didn't. The realization unsettled him, stirring a sense of vulnerability he hadn't experienced in years. By the time the check arrived, Adrian was visibly distracted, his usual sharp focus replaced by an uncharacteristic restlessness. He signed the bill without bothering to review it, eager to put the night behind him. As he stood to leave, he glanced toward the kitchen, half expecting to see her emerge one last time. But she was nowhere to be found. The absence left him feeling oddly hollow, as though he had missed an opportunity he couldn't yet define. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, the streets glistening under the glow of streetlights. Adrian climbed into the back seat of his chauffeured car, his mind racing with unanswered questions. Who was she, really? Why had she known his name? And most importantly, why did he care so much? These thoughts swirled in his head as the vehicle pulled away from the curb, carrying him further from the restaurant, and closer to a truth he wasn't prepared to confront. Days turned into weeks, and Adrian found himself unable to shake the memory of the waitress. Try as he might, her image lingered in his mind, haunting him with the same persistence as an unsolved puzzle. He told himself it was nothing more than idle curiosity, a fleeting distraction born of boredom. Yet deep down, he knew better. Something about her had unsettled him in ways he couldn't fully comprehend, and the more he tried to dismiss it, the more it consumed him. In an effort to regain control, Adrian threw himself into his work with renewed vigor. Meetings stretched late into the night, deals were brokered with ruthless efficiency, and his empire continued to expand at an unprecedented pace. On paper, everything was proceeding exactly as it should. But beneath the surface, cracks began to form. Sleep eluded him, his thoughts often drifting back to that rainy evening and the woman who had somehow managed to pierce his carefully constructed armor. Even during high-stakes negotiations, her voice echoed faintly in his ears, a reminder of the questions he couldn't answer. One afternoon, as Adrian sat in his penthouse office overlooking the city skyline, his assistant buzzed in with an unexpected visitor request. A young woman named Elena Martinez had arrived unannounced, insisting on speaking with him personally. The name meant nothing to Adrian, but something about the description, dark hair, striking eyes, an air of quiet confidence, sent a jolt through him. Against his better judgment, he agreed to see her. When she entered the room, Adrian's breath caught in his throat. It was her. The waitress from the restaurant. But she looked different now, dressed in a sleek charcoal suit that accentuated her commanding presence. Gone was the deferential demeanor he remembered. In its place was a woman radiating authority and purpose. She extended her hand, her grip firm and unwavering. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice smooth and measured. "Thank you for seeing me." Adrian gestured for her to sit, his mind racing as he struggled to reconcile the person before him with the image etched in his memory. "Ms. Martinez," he replied cautiously. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Elena settled into the chair across from him, her posture impeccable. She studied him for a moment, her gaze steady and unflinching. "I imagine you're wondering why I'm here," she began, her tone neutral. "Let me cut to the chase. My family owns Martinez Industries. You may have heard of us. We specialize in renewable energy solutions, among other ventures." Adrian's jaw tightened. Of course he had heard of them. Martinez Industries was a titan in its field, rivaling even some of his own holdings. If what she was saying was true, then the woman sitting across from him wasn't just anyone. She was part of one of the most influential families in the industry. The implications hit him like a freight train. "I take it you're surprised," Elena continued, her lips curving into a faint smile. "That night at the restaurant, I was undercover. My father tasked me with evaluating potential partners for a joint venture we're pursuing. Imagine my disappointment when I discovered your attitude toward those you deem beneath you." Adrian opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. He felt exposed, stripped bare by her revelation. All the arrogance, the dismissiveness, the casual cruelty he had displayed, it had all been witnessed firsthand by someone whose opinion now mattered more than he could have anticipated. Elena leaned forward slightly, her expression softening. "I'm not here to punish you, Mr. Cole. In fact, I believe there's an opportunity here, for both of us. But I need to know if you're capable of growth. Can you look beyond titles and appearances? Or are you content to remain trapped in your own biases?" Her words struck a chord deep within him, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about himself. For the first time in years, Adrian felt genuinely humbled. And as he sat there, grappling with the weight of her challenge, he realized that the answers he sought weren't about her at all, they were about him. Elena's revelation hung heavily in the air, a silent storm brewing between them. Adrian stared at her, his mind struggling to process the enormity of what she had just disclosed. This wasn't merely a matter of mistaken identity or misplaced pride, it was a reckoning, a mirror held up to reflect the flaws he had long ignored. The woman seated before him wasn't just a member of a powerful family. She was a force unto herself, someone who commanded respect not through wealth or title but through sheer will and conviction. "I don't expect an answer right now," Elena said softly, breaking the tense silence. Her voice carried a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the gravity of her earlier words. "What I'm offering isn't just a business partnership. It's a chance to redefine how you view the world. And yourself." Adrian swallowed hard, his throat dry despite the glass of water sitting untouched on his desk. He wanted to defend himself, to argue that her assessment was unfair or exaggerated. But the truth was undeniable. She had seen him at his worst, stripped of pretense and posturing. The memory of his condescending remarks burned in his chest like acid, a stark reminder of the person he had allowed himself to become. "What makes you think I'm worth the effort?" he asked finally, his voice rough with emotion. It was a question born of genuine uncertainty, one that revealed a vulnerability he rarely permitted himself to feel. "After everything you've seen, why give me another chance?" Elena regarded him thoughtfully, her dark eyes searching his face for something unspoken. "Because everyone deserves a chance to change," she replied simply. "And because I believe people are more than the sum of their mistakes. You've built an empire, Mr. Cole, but at what cost? Is it worth continuing down a path that leaves you isolated and unfulfilled?" Her words struck a nerve, resonating with doubts Adrian had buried beneath layers of ambition and success. He thought of the sleepless nights, the endless meetings, the relentless pursuit of more money, more power, more validation. And yet, for all he had achieved, he couldn't recall the last time he had felt truly satisfied. The emptiness gnawed at him, a constant companion he had learned to ignore but never escape. "You're asking me to trust you," Adrian said slowly, his gaze locking onto hers. "But why should I? For all I know, this could be some elaborate scheme to teach me a lesson." A small, wry smile tugged at the corners of Elena's lips. "If revenge were my goal, I assure you, I wouldn't have come here personally. I could have walked away that night and let your ignorance speak for itself. But I chose to give you this opportunity because I saw something in you, something worth salvaging." Her candor disarmed him, stripping away the defenses he had spent years fortifying. For the first time in what felt like forever, Adrian allowed himself to consider the possibility that he wasn't beyond redemption. That maybe, just maybe, the woman sitting across from him wasn't an adversary but a catalyst for transformation. "What happens next?" he asked quietly, his voice tinged with cautious hope. "If I agree to this partnership, what does it entail?" Elena leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "First, we start with transparency. No hidden agendas, no ulterior motives. Just two people working toward a shared vision. Second, I want you to meet my team, not as Adrian Cole, the billionaire tycoon, but as someone willing to listen and learn. They'll challenge you, push you out of your comfort zone, and hold you accountable. Are you ready for that?" Adrian hesitated, the weight of her proposal settling over him like a mantle. It wasn't just a business deal, it was a test of character, a leap of faith into uncharted territory. Yet as he looked at Elena, he realized that the alternative, staying the same, remaining trapped in his self-imposed isolation, was no longer an option. "I'm ready," he said firmly, surprising even himself with the conviction in his voice. "Whatever it takes." Elena smiled then, a genuine expression that softened the sharp angles of her face. "Good. Because this is only the beginning." As they shook hands to seal their agreement, Adrian felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. It was fragile, tentative, but undeniably present. And though he couldn't predict where this journey would lead, one thing was certain: his encounter with Elena Martinez had changed him irrevocably. Adrian embarked on the partnership with Elena, humbled and determined to prove himself. Her team challenged him daily, forcing him to confront his biases and grow as a leader. Over time, their professional relationship deepened into mutual respect, and something more. Adrian found joy not in wealth, but in meaningful connections and purposeful work. One evening, under the same rain-soaked skies where they first met, Elena revealed her belief in his potential had always been real. "You've changed," she said softly, smiling at the man he'd become. Adrian took her hand, realizing she'd given him far more than a second chance. She'd given him a new life. Together, they stood ready to reshape industries and inspire others. As lightning illuminated the night sky, Adrian knew he'd finally found fulfillment. The billionaire once mocked for arrogance now embraced humility and love as his greatest victories.